So welcome to the Lost Sheep Found podcast. I'm your host, Carrie, and this is Brandy, my co-host. And today we're joined by Shavonne Thompson, the founder of Throttle and Thrive. It's a substance misuse facility that treats men that are either veterans or first responders. Before we go into this amazing organization, Shavonne, can you take us way back and color us a picture of your life growing up in Ventura?
Sure. Yeah. Life was really good in Ventura, kind of central coast, sort of Southern California, kind of on the border, agricultural town, about 100,000 people. I grew up going to the beach, and my dad was my sandcastle builder, and my mom cooked dinner every night for us. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and we were all really close growing up. My dad was also my soccer coach. My mom is a teacher, so academics were really important in our household. And I had a very normal middle-class suburban upbringing. Very, very normal. Up until I was 13, and my older brother, who was a couple years older than me, started smoking swag and marijuana and started introducing that to me, as well as alcohol, as well as having his friends around. So from a pretty young age, I was sneaky and mischievous and learned how to manipulate the systems to get what I wanted. And without enough guidance. I mean, my parents are wonderful people and they did the best they could, but my mom grew up so sheltered. She had no idea that teenagers growing up in the late 90s were going to be kind of wild and rebellious and what was going on. I remember at 14, I was in 8th grade telling my mom that my brother and I were going to dance parties. And so she's like, oh, that's nice. Like they're going to dance parties. We were going to 805 Underground Rave.
A little different.
My poor mother is just naive and was very sheltered and just had kind of no idea about what was going on. And at the same time that I was doing really well academically, excelling in school, playing sports, everything's going very well. The flip side of that was behind the scenes, there were just a lot of things that were starting to happen that are probably not what 13-year-olds should be doing. So it's a little introduction of kind of how I grew up.
Was your family involved in the church during your childhood?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was baptized as a toddler along with my sister, who is younger than me, and my brother and my dad. We were all actually baptized by my uncle, who was a Lutheran minister, but we grew up going to a Presbyterian church. So my grandfather, my mom's dad, and his wife, my grandmother, they raised my mom and her siblings in the Presbyterian church. And so we grew up going to their church as kids. And I liked church. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed Sunday school. I've always believed. I don't think that there was ever a moment in my life where I didn't believe. But I've just been wildly disobedient at different points in my life. And so growing up, we went to church pretty much every Sunday. I was involved in different youth group ministries, and Bible studies and things like that growing up. And we would go to a church family camp. If you've ever heard of Forest Home out in San Bernardino.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Great place. So we would go to Forest Home every summer for a week. My grandparents, I think, paid for it, and my uncle and my cousins and extended family would go. And it was so much fun. We got to go play on the lake and ride horses and do arts and crafts. And I loved it. So faith was definitely a part of our family, but it wasn't something that my parents made like personal with us as kids. Like I don't remember my parents ever like praying with us or teaching us about the Bible. It was more like, okay, we're going to go to church and you go to Sunday school and we'll be here and then we'll go to brunch afterwards with the family. Or maybe praying before a meal, like when my grandparents were there. But there wasn't that like level of intimacy or shared faith. Yeah, it was more the church as a building kind of a Christianity.
So after high school and everything, where you got, you went to USC,
Mm-hmm.
correct? Or was there a different step there?
So I graduated top of my class in in Ventura and immediately went on to USC. So I studied civil engineering, both an undergrad and a master's degree. And I remember actually when I was 18 in high school, my brother was gone. And so I had limited my using to only on the weekends because academics were really important to me. And then when I was a senior in high school, I had joined a gym with my mom and I had met some personal trainers at the gym and we were working out a ton. And one of them actually had a conversation with me and I just basically stopped smoking weed after that and really haven't since. Minus a trip to Amsterdam. That's a different story.
It's part of the plane ticket, I think.
Yeah. Oh, the past. During my senior year of high school, I did start to get more involved in my faith and investigating. And I actually went through one of the Alpha courses. If you've heard of Alpha,
I have not heard of that.
Like for new believers, typically at a church, if someone is interested in exploring Christianity, there's a series where they'll typically have dinner or food and they show, I think they're Nikki Gumbel videos, and it's an introduction to Christianity and then a group discussion. So I took the Alpha course when I was 18. And then when I went to college, I think I reached out via email to one church and they never responded. And I never tried to go to any other church. Yeah. Until I was a junior in college, I was at a sorority event. My sorority was good friends with this one fraternity. I think it was like the Christian guys fraternity, or a lot of them were Christians, one or the other. And one of them, he and I had engineering classes together, and he invited me to a local church in LA called Mosaic, and it was meeting at a nightclub. And I had never heard of a church that would meet at a nightclub. I was like, well, that's interesting. Let me check this out. And it was Sunday evening, so I didn't have to get up early. And they had fog machines and cool music and a cool pastor. I was like, wow, this is great. And so I did start to get involved in a church junior year of college. But again, it was that double kind of lifestyle of drinking and partying and college life, but then still knowing that I longed to walk with the Lord, but not having a community and trying to kind of live in two worlds. A lot of that was going on. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty interesting with that church. It's like, let's see how we can identify and get those younger people to attend.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I would go to a church.
I would, for sure. The mornings are hard for me. So, but I don't know if I need the smoke anymore. But in my teenage years, I would have liked it.
That would have been amazing.
So, yeah, we've listened to a couple of your podcasts. So, and recording. So you had mentioned, some of your darker times with drinking in college and what was the breaking point exactly of like, you need help. I don't know. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was 27 and it was actually a few years after college because during college, I was still focused on academics and I wanted to get a great job. And of course I wanted to graduate. In grad school, it needed to be financially stable. My parents had hit some rough times financially, and I was also 23, 24 years old. It was the time I paid my own bills. So I had to work and go to school and be responsible and pay rent. And so it was actually after college, I moved down to Hermosa Beach, and there was a lot larger of a party scene and more people that I was able to go drinking with and party with. And it was more of a social environment than sort of the downtown LA vibe. I just fit in a lot more in Hermosa Beach. And I was working full time. So now I had the financial ability to pay to go out and party on the weekends. And I didn't have to study for any tests. I just had to physically show up for work. And so the demands on me became a lot less. And so it became a lot easier for me to drink a lot more. And because alcoholism is a progressive disease, it was getting worse and it was really picking up. So it was when I was 27 and I'd been living in Hermosa Beach for a couple of years. And the wheels just they were starting to fall off. And I like to say that I got off of the elevator before it exploded at the bottom. So January 27th of 2013 was the last day that I drank. And it was a Sunday. And a friend of mine and I went to a charity event and I got really drunk. And then I came home and proceeded to get more drunk and call my then boyfriend on the phone in a blackout and have who knows what of a conversation with him. And then I woke up on Monday, January 28th, 2013, to some text messages from him. Hey, call me. So I call him, like, what is going on? What happened? And he just said over the phone, hey, if you're going to drink like that, I'm not going to be with you. And we hung up the phone. And at that time, I thought that I wanted to marry him. And I just got this epiphany from God of, Shavonne, you can either get help or you will lose everything that's important to you. It's going to include losing this relationship, but it's also going to include losing your job, losing your vehicle, losing your apartment, losing everything that I had worked really hard to achieve. And in that moment, that was the first time that I surrendered. I was like, I've got a problem. I can't do this and I need help. And so later that day, I did end up going to work. And then later that day at lunch, called that boyfriend and said, hey, I think I have a drinking problem. I had tried to stop drinking in the past a couple of times, which worked for very short amounts of time, but really never produced any meaningful results. I said, I've got a drinking problem. I don't know what to do. I think I need help. Well, he was an angel in disguise, clothing, and he was a little bit older than me and he had gotten sober really young. So he had a long time sober through Narcotics Anonymous. And he's the one that actually took me to my first AA meeting. And it was through the rooms of AA that I was able to get physically sober, emotionally sober, work the steps, connect with other women, continue on my journey with God, but this time from a place of obedience and surrender and actually living a life of integrity and having my life actually like be one. And from there, things have just, it's been an incredible journey.
So you're angel in disguise. That is amazing.
Yeah, it was a godsend because I thought that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was a joke. I mean, I had no idea what it was. My only, I guess, exposure to AA was like watching Fight Club. Like that was what I thought AA was like. And so that's not what it's like. And I had no idea. I also had no idea of what an alcoholic was, except for an alcoholic that's actually drinking. I had no concept of recovery, no concept of a life without drinking. I thought alcoholics were the homeless people behind the liquor store, by the dumpster drinking out of a brown bag. And then I started showing up to Alcoholics Anonymous in Manhattan Beach to women's meetings, and they were doctors and attorneys and well-kept housewives and other professionals. And they were intelligent and beautiful and sweet and wonderful. And I could identify with them. And so I kept showing up and I got a sponsor and I started working the steps and it radically changed my life. And I'm still sober today.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. I think it's amazing that, you going in for one time and like working the steps, like you put your heart in it and you got out what they talk about where, a lot of the cases it's multiple times because people fight the steps, I think maybe, and just that you took in and dug in and it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people really have a hard time surrendering. And so relapse is a part of their story. Alcoholics are tough people. And so they can sustain a lot and they can go through really hard times and still keep drinking. But when they finally get to that place of surrender and they're waving the white flag and they're sick and tired of being sick and tired and they finally surrender to the program, that's when the real healing journey can start to take place.
Yeah.
So where did your journey take you in your sobriety? You were in a construction career. How long did you stay in that career?
I stayed with Hensel Phelps, the general contractor that I worked for, up until April 5th of 2023. So it was actually 13 years and about a month that I worked for them. And I only stopped working for them because the Lord revealed to me that I was meant to run a treatment center. And just this crazy kingdom assignment, like he just ushered it into my life and then started doing all of these miracles. And he called me to quit that job. And so I gave up a 401k, an amazing healthcare package and a truck and a computer and a phone and like all these benefits and bonuses and all these things. And God's like, nope, you're going to go be a business owner and you're going to do this. And I'm going to be with you and I'm going to provide everything you need. And I'm like, okay, well, I believe that you are who you say you are. And I believe that you're good. I believe that you're faithful. And you've shown me that you're going to do this. And so it's been this wild journey of faith, and he is faithful.
I mean, did he start out? I know for me, and I had briefly shared my story with you, whereas like over the past year, it's like, you're going to do a podcast. You're going to start this podcast. And no, I'm not. And I mean, was his calling to you like, you're going to start a business, or was it straight up, this is what I have for you. You're going to start a treatment center?
So in the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, I was going to a church in Santa Monica that I loved. It was a wonderful community, but they shut down pretty much completely during the pandemic. And I was very alone, and I didn't have anyone to be with. And I randomly was at like a birthday party or going away party or something for a random friend, and someone that I had known from actually that church that used to be on staff had shown up, and she and her husband were there. And turns out they had started like a little underground church, and they were meeting through the pandemic. So they were having dinner, and they were hugging each other, and they weren't wearing any masks, and they were still worshiping. And I was like, you're my kind of people. I want to hang out with you. They're like, well, it's kind of far away. It's down in Palos Verdes. I'm like, I don't care. I will go anywhere. I just need people to hug me and eat dinner with me. Like, please, can I come to your church? So I joined that church in August of 2020. And approximately a year later, it was September 1st of 2021, our local pastor invited me to go out to dinner with one of our overseeing pastors who was visiting from out of town. And we were just getting to know him. He was like a friend of one of the other overseeing pastors, and we were just starting kind of to work together. And I was like, Pastor Stephen, I'm busy. Like, I don't have time to go to dinner. He's like, no, really, I really think you need to meet with him. I'm like, okay, fine. So we went to dinner after work on a random Wednesday, and I had no expectations. I just thought it was like a social dinner. And I show up, and Jacob is very, very prophetic. I actually believe that he's office of prophet. And so we're having dinner, and he starts to just tell me what he thinks God is saying. He's like, I think God is saying that you should be interested in starting your own business. I'm like, what are you talking about? I have this great corporate job that I went to school for, that it's everything that I ever wanted. Like, this is what I'm meant to do. Why would I be interested in starting my own business? And we said, well, you're going to have a lot of employees, and it might involve something from your past. And I think that you should pray about it for the next 4 months, and you should read Daniel, Joseph, Proverbs. And then God's going to start to move, and you should continue to pray about it. I'm like, okay, well, I can pray for 4 months. What's the worst that could happen? Right. And so we talked about a whole lot of other things. And then I'm driving away from that dinner in my big yellow construction truck. And I started to pray. I'm like, okay, God, like what are you doing here? And that's when I just had this open vision of, like, in my mind's eye, seeing this vision of a treatment center that would be rooted in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, because a lot of treatment centers are not rooted in true recovery. They're doing other things that I personally don't think work very well. And it would be rooted in wellness. So not rooted in pharmaceuticals. It would involve exercise, healthy eating, and getting quality sleep. And then it would also be rooted in Christianity, and there would be a strong invitation to faith. And I just broke down and started weeping, which is not normal for me at all. And so I knew that the Spirit was moving. And then I started to look back, and I actually, when I was about 30 and I learned what treatment was, I had really wanted to start a treatment center. But then I Googled, I'm like, okay, how do you start a treatment center? They're like, well, you need like $1 million and risk and 80% failure rate. I'm like, yeah, no thanks. And I shut the door on it, because at that time when I was 30, I wanted to get married and have a social life and like have kids. And I knew that if I started a business, it would consume everything that I had. And I did not have $1 million, and I didn't want to take that kind of a risk. And I completely shut the door on it. And then God reawakened that desire. And that was the vision that I had. And it was like, no, I do want you to start a treatment center, and I am going to be with you. And then he started to show me all of these other amazing things. So when I had first joined that little underground church, we did a day of prayer. And during that day of prayer, one of the like little activities was you could sit at this table, and they had paper and colorful markers, and you could just like draw or write things that you thought you were getting from the Lord. And he gave me this one very specific kind of writing, and it says, blessed to be a blessing. And then it has all of these like character traits on it that I felt like God was telling me. And it was restorer, rehabilitation, bringing people from darkness to light. And it was actually the beginnings of the identity that he would give me to lead this treatment center. But at the time, I had no idea what it was. I was like, this is weird. Okay. But I kept it. And today it's on my like prayer wall, at my prayer desk. And I'm like, wow, God is so good. He was preparing me for this. So then fast forwarding back to September 1st of 2021, when I got the original word from Jacob, I did start to pray about it. And I started to press in and I started to ask, okay, Lord, like, is this what you want me to do? And he started to show up in ways such as I started to talk about it just with friends. Like, hey, I think I might actually quit my job and start a treatment center. People would respond with, oh, well, I know somebody that runs a treatment center. Why don't I give you their number and you can talk to them? And then next thing I know, a treatment center owner is sitting down with me and telling me all about how treatment works and about his facilities and offering to mentor me for free. And so thing after thing after thing just kept lining up.
That's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I think at one point you said you called it your kingdom assignment, and you had a very touching story about the address of your.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely.
It's just one of those little signs that I feel like it just touches you, that like God's hands in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was one of the most probably like tangible miracles that he did. So the property that we rent, so I don't own the house, it's a rental. It's the address. So the address is 1549 Via Leon, and Leon means lion, and lion is a symbol for God. Mm-hmm. And I had already built out my website and there were lions all over it. I was like, oh, that's so cool. We're on God Street. Okay. And then in December of 2022, I had to give the like deposit and first month's rent. And I had agreed to pay a couple months rent in advance. And so I'm writing this check for $40,000 to the landlord. Yeah. Talk about faith. And I'm like, I've never paid that much money for anything ever in my life. And I'm like, God, am I crazy? Is this going to work? Like, did I just blow $40,000 on renting a mansion that, you know, we're not licensed? Because the first thing when you start to open a treatment center, you have to actually have the rental agreement in place in the name of the business to be able to even start the application process for the license. Awesome. So it's one of the first things you have to do. So you have to fork over that money right away. So I gave over that money and I was scared. I was so scared. I was like, is this real? Is it going to work? First of all, the fact that I qualified to rent this house is also a miracle. I never made enough money working in construction to rent a multi-million-dollar mansion. They just didn't check my financial background, basically. Which the fact that they like didn't is also kind of mind-boggling. I mean, I did show them my bank statements of the money that I had in my account, which I was going to be promptly liquidating to make payroll. They didn't do their due diligence. And I think that was a huge blessing from the Lord as well, of like, it's okay. Like, I got you. I'm providing this place. Yeah. And so after I gave over the money to move in, 2 days later, I went to pay one of my very first employees. And my bank was going to be late and I really wanted to pay him on the day I said I was going to pay him. So I'm like, hey, can I like Venmo you the money? And he couldn't figure out his Venmo. I'm like, okay, PayPal maybe. And so I'm like, well, you know, what's your PayPal handle? And he's like, what's your handle? And I go to look at my PayPal handle and it's Shavonne Thompson 1549, the exact address of the house. Yeah. My PayPal handle was assigned to me in 2012. And so the fact that that number was assigned to me, it just gave me confirmation that the Lord had been setting this up from way, 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 way long ago. And the house was built the same year that I was conceived and born. Yes. And this is in the shape of a cross.
What? It just gives me chills.
Yeah.
The houses are not built in the shape of a cross. That's not.
No, they are not. That's amazing.
I love that story.
And to put, I mean, I think people can say, oh, just coincidence. It's like, really, at what point do you say, okay, this is
We
God?
have a saying around the facility because so many of our clients come in, they're not believers or they're mad at God or they're atheists or they have church hurt or whatever it is. And I just ask them, I'm like, hey, just pay attention to things. You're going to start to see a lot of coincidences and start to ask, is it really just coincidence, or could there be something greater going on? And then once they start to see the Lord working in their life, I'm like, is it odd or is it God? Which is an AA saying, but we start to point out so they can start to have eyes to see. And it happens for all of them.
And I think, right. And I think even for myself, I mean, I did grow up in the church. I did grow up in a Christian school till 12th grade. I mean, I knew God was working, but was I allowing myself to see that and to accept those visions or, those answers that he's trying to get through to me? I mean, sometimes I felt he just needed to knock me in the head, but
yeah, you got the property. You started through all of these signs that were happening to make it happen. You were, giving a leap of faith, really, but you felt like God is making you or, telling you that this is what he wants from you. So once you got Throttle and Thrive up and running, I mean, how have they supported these first responders, and what have you seen God work in their life in these little moments and these little signs and coincidence that aren't odd?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, even this morning, I was just having a conversation with one of our clients. He's graduating the program tomorrow and going home. And he's like, Shavonne, you've saved my life. And I don't think you will ever understand what it means that you saved my life and the life of my boys and my family and how far this has impacted me. Because when he came in, it was basically, he was about to die. He was either going to drink himself to death or, he was going to carry out a plan of suicide, which is actually how most of our first responders come in. Some of them even have failed suicide attempts in the past, and they come in absolutely broken. And it's heartbreaking to see them come in, but we're excited because they all get better. And so early on, we started to see the Lord move. We had one client in particular that when he got here, he had been out on IOD for 6, 7, 8 months, something. But because they're not allowed to work when they're IOD, he was just staying at home, smoking weed, drinking, and his mental health was just like declining. And when he got here, he could hardly sit through a meal. He would like scarf down food and then he would just pace around the table. But we're like, all right, we're here with you. We got you. He had also grown up in a version of Christianity, and he was very averse to Christianity. He was like, I don't want anything to do with religion. I don't like God. I've spent the past 13 years running away from God. And we're like, okay, cool. He's like, I'm atheist. I'm like, we'll see about that.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. And so we got him physically sober, obviously the first step. So it was kind of a rougher detox, but he was a tough guy and we were there just with him through it. And that's our main way to support the men that come through. It's like, we're here, we're with them, we sit with them, we talk to them, we feed them. We have a really highly structured program and amazing staff. And we're just like, we're in the trenches with them until they can start to do some of the work on their own. So we get him physically sober. And then we start to work on the emotional pieces. So he's meeting with his therapist. He's going through EMDR. The trauma load is starting to reduce a little bit. And then we're able to get him sleeping. And he was actually one of the clients that really did not want to use medications or pharmaceuticals. So we went the natural route with him, which is one of the things that we do. We have a wellness director and she started to put him on supplements. I think for him, like the magnesium and the L-theanine really helped calm his nerves and get him to be able to sleep. So once we were able to get him sleeping and help him, things started to shift. But he was still really struggling with anxiety and he didn't want to be on meds, which is great. We don't really want anyone on meds, especially if they don't come in on meds. We're like, let's get you more sustainable long-term solutions and tools that actually work. And so he started to be open about the God stuff. He's like, well, how did I really, end up here at this little, brand new no-name treatment facility? And he's like, something is going on here. And so that opened the door for me to be able to teach him about Ephesians 6. So I just remember like opening a Bible. I keep a lot of Bibles around here. And he and I read it together and I taught him about the armor of God. And I'm like, would you ever show up to work, law enforcement, like without your gun, without your vest? And he's like, no, of course not. Never. I'm like, well, then why are you showing up to this spiritual battle without your armor on? And he's like, what are you talking about? And so I started to explain to him how to fight in the spirit and what he's really up against. And I'll never remember the day that he came in my office and he's like, hey, last night I woke up because I was having really bad night terrors and then I prayed against it and I was able to fall asleep. And I was like, yes, it's working. Like, we're winning. I had a firefighter that was very, very severe, had been in and out of treatment for many, many years, childhood trauma, vocational trauma. I mean, we typically see the trifecta, right? The childhood trauma, the vocational trauma on top of the propensity for alcoholism and addiction. And when you get that together, that's the nuclear bomb that when it goes off, like the wheels are just falling off. And so this particular firefighter came in, had been to treatment before, hadn't worked, he'd relapsed, et cetera, just really broken to the point where he had been like sleeping under his bed, hallucinating that people were going to come through the wall and kill him. He wasn't showing up to work and he was just living in the bottom of a bottle. But I spent many hours with him on the phone. He tried to get on a plane one of the days, wasn't able to get on the plane just with all the anxiety, left the airport. We got someone to go to the airport with him and sit with him at the gate until he got on that plane. And then he got here. He did have, it was just a whole traumatic thing. Like he had to be escorted off the plane by the fire department, which was super traumatizing for him. He had history of self-harm. Like it was just, it was so devastating. But I remember being on the phone with him. And I knew that I had to teach him to fight back against the fear or he wasn't going to be able to like cross that bridge. And I had to get him to participate in fighting against the darkness. And so he had told me that he hated God and he was mad at God, but I had to get him to start praying, even though he didn't know that he was praying. And so I'm like, hey, buddy, if someone were to break into your apartment and try to rob you, would you kick his ass? And he's like, yeah, of course I would. And I'm like, okay, well, there is darkness. There's evil and it's trying to attack you and you've got to fight back. Just like if a person broke into your apartment and you're going to beat him up, you got to fight back. So I need you to say like, hey, anxiety, get out of here. You can't be here. Depression, you have to leave. And I started to teach him to command this, basically the spirits to like leave. And he did. And then I was like praying for him, but not in Christianese, in more of like secular language. And he's like, that made me feel so much better. Can you do that again? Like, absolutely. And so like meeting them where they're at. And that's so important to me because this is a ministry. We meet them where they're at, but how we're different than the world or the things that don't work is we will not leave them bleeding in the street. Because so many people are like, oh, we're going to meet them where they're at. And, you know, all this nonsense. I'm like, but you're leaving them bleeding, broken in the street. So we actually teach them how to fight back. We heal their trauma. We work with them. We give them the resources and we actually pull them out of whatever darkness they're facing and launch them into a life of recovery too.
Well, and you're also not shoving it down their throats. You are looking at each person as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
That's how God looks at us. And that's how God communicates with us individually. And you're providing
a safe place for them to connect on their time, but the opportunity of a safe place to be open to connecting.
Yeah, and they have to be open to it. I did learn the hard way earlier on. There were some firefighters here that I knew that the Lord was working in their life, and I really wanted them to like come to church with me. But I invited them like one too many times or was like too pushy about it. And they got kind of turned off and then got mad at me and told me that, you know, they didn't like it and things. And so I did kind of learn the hard way once or twice that it has to be done in the right way. And it has to be because they want to. It can't be because I want them to, or I know that it will be good for them. They really have to want to. And so not all clients are there yet, but most of the clients now, they start to see the benefits of the guys that do go to church with me. That do come to figure out a higher power. And so it's very contagious here because once we get some of the first responders that have been here longer that are advocating for God or for the church or et cetera, it's contagious with the other guys. They're like, oh, well, he said it was good and I trust him, so I'm going to do it. Yeah.
Right.
And I've learned, even though I'm just as pushy about like, you must sleep and eat your vegetables and work out, they're not offended by any of that. So I've learned like Taylor.
Right. I also love to hear your more holistic approach to, you know, over-the-counter meds. Can you share with us any of your like recommendations for like depression, anxiety, all those things that are so readily prescribed pills?
Sure. On a foundational level, well, there's so many things. First of all, the pharmaceuticals long-term are going to cause, I think, in general. And I'm not a medical doctor. These are all my opinion, but I think
Yeah,
long-term
of
pharmaceutical
course.
use typically is going to have a lot of side effects, and it's not talked about enough. So I have personal friends, like a guy at my church he's almost 70, and he was on pharmaceuticals for anxiety and depression for a long time. And he now has neuropathy in his feet and in his legs and lives in horrible pain as a result. Also, the impact to the kidney and the livers, like long-term pharmaceutical use isn't good in general for things like anxiety and depression. Also with an SSRI, so a serotonin, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, that's going to actually change the way that the brain functions. And if you ever try to get off it, like good luck, because your brain is not going to function the way it's supposed to make you feel good. So the horrors of that, and getting off of a benzo can actually cause seizures. The main thing with the pharmaceuticals is, my favorite analogy is, if the check engine light on your car goes on, do you just take the light bulb out? Like, no. So if someone has anxiety, why are we medicating the symptoms? Let's figure out why they have anxiety. So we had a firefighter come in with pretty bad anxiety and trouble sleeping and different things, which almost all of our clients come in with a lot of trouble sleeping, but they all leave sleeping really well without the meds. So the issue was he had, family problems, the wife and the kids and blah, blah, blah. There were issues there. So we had to work through that as if it were trauma, and with the therapy and him coming to terms. So that was resolved. And then he had a lot of financial problems. He had debt and he wasn't willing to look at the debt. And so we actually sat down, and I teach on personal finance here. So I actually had him get on a computer, log into the accounts, figure out how much debt he had, what the interest rates were, and what the plan was to get out of debt. So debt strategy is something that I teach on, and there's a very specific way that we do it. So once he learned that he could get out of debt and that the payments were, affordable, and that he could be debt free, and it was like 21 months, he's like, oh, that's amazing. I thought I was going to be in debt for 10 more years or whatever. So once we started to deal with all of the things that were causing him the anxiety started coming down. So, why are we just going to put someone on meds and let their problems continue? We have to treat it at the root cause. Now, granted, I do believe in supplementations that can help along the way. So there's, I mentioned the L-theanine and GABA and tryptophan and other things in the evening, as well as diet. Like eating bananas in the evening, because they are rich in magnesium and they actually have tryptophan and other things. Like eating bananas in the evening can actually help with sleep, or having more carbs in the evening can actually help with sleep. And
how dare you say carbs? No.
How many cookies I eat.
So it's okay.
Just one before bed. It's supposed to be this way.
Yes, yeah. And so I don't know all of the strategies. Our wellness director is the one who's really the expert in everything. But when it comes to depression, sometimes it's a deficiency in different vitamins and minerals. I think B12, I take B12 every morning and I love it. I also take fish oil and things like that. So it is tailored to the individual. But once we optimize someone's health and get them sleeping and eating and exercising and bring down their trauma load, and then start to resolve the reasons why they're having depression or anxiety, and we clear up all that, then we can see if there is truly a need for medication. And usually the answer is that there's not. Now, sometimes some people are going through something really hard. We had one guy come in and he was on an antidepressant, and his wife had just left him, and he was trying to get sober for the umpteenth time, and he was struggling. And he's like, I'm going to stay on this antidepressant for the next 6 months, and then I'm going to wean off of it. I'm like, great. That is a great plan, because you are going through it. You need some help and you have a plan to get off of it. What we see is that people get on medications and there's never a plan to get off. And so then fast forward years later, they actually don't have anxiety or depression, and they're still on these meds, and then the meds are causing other problems. We had a 65-year-old retired detective come in, and he came in for alcoholism, but he was on a really, really heavy benzo and an antidepressant. And I'm like, are you depressed? And he's like, no, my life is great. I'm like, so why are you on an antidepressant? He's like, well, because the doctor told me to take it a decade ago. I'm like, well, do you still want to be on it? And he's like, no, why don't we get off of that? And I'm like, okay, great. And I'm like, okay, this anti-anxiety med. He had pretty bad PTSI, but he didn't really have anxiety, but he was suffering with memory issues and coordination. Well, guess what happened when we took him off the benzo and the Klonopin? Well, the Klonopin was a benzo, and then the antidepressant. his memory started coming back and his coordination got better. I'm like,
It's amazing.
Wow. What we see is that sometimes the meds, they're not always needed long-term. If they need to be used short-term, great, but making sure the clients are properly educated. What are the side effects? I love it when someone's like thinking about going on a med and I'm like, well, have you looked at the side effects? Let's just Google this. Let's do a little research. Let's make sure you understand the whole picture. And it's like suicidal ideation and erectile dysfunction. And he's like, nope, not taking.
Yeah, you can just add that to the end of anything if they're not reading with you. And they'll be like, nope.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Like, well, because the doctor said it would help me. I'm like, you don't need this. And you're in 24/7 level of care. Like you don't need it on week 1 or 2. Maybe if by week 4, you're still struggling with something, then we can create a short-term medication plan that's going to be overseen by a doctor. But my big thing is let's educate our clients on why they're taking something, for how long they're going to take it, what the risk factors are, and then what the benefits are or what the alternative solutions are.
Unfortunately, my neighbor across the street, he was an alcoholic and went to the doctor and gave him medication and he ended up killing himself. And the number one side effect of that medication was suicide.
Yeah, which is horrible. Horrible.
It's horrible. Like the wife saw that after and there was no follow up from the doctor or anything. And like she said, the pharmacist called to see how he was doing like a week after it was prescribed. And she's like, well, he's dead, and it's just so sad that
you keep
doctors are so quick.
Well, they don't have a solution. As a medical provider, the Western medicine has really gone in the direction of pharmaceuticals. And if there's not a magical pill, then the doctors are like, well, I don't know what to do. So I have to give you a magic pill. And there is no magic pill for alcoholism. There is not. And I'm pretty actively against medically assisted treatment, meaning when someone is on their own doing things like Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol, naltrexone, all of the magical pharmaceuticals that are going to keep you from relapsing, they don't work. And actually naltrexone, I believe it's naltrexone. Sometimes I get them mixed up, but it's basically a pill that you take every day so that if you were to drink, you're not going to get drunk. Well, one, if you want to get drunk, you just stop taking it. Like, hello.
Yeah. Right.
The other thing is if you were taking it, like you took your pill in the morning and then you end up drinking later that day, people learn that you just have to drink more to get drunk, and they actually end up dying of alcohol poisoning because they drank too much to get the effect.
Yeah.
So it actually, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And the Suboxone nonsense and methadone, like, no, it doesn't work. It's just keeping people on a low high. Like, that's not so pretty.
Yeah.
I love this. I value your long-term, strategies versus the quick fix. And especially with these first responders and the trauma. And
I can tell you, I mean, as being a firefighter wife, I'm going to cry.
Oh no.
My husband having to deal with people that have committed suicide or drink themselves to death.
Yeah.
And I know my husband is really big into pushing peer support and mental health in their fire department. But I see there's
a huge need
issue
because the first responders, they are sensitive guys. They are, and they really, really care about people. They go into the profession because they want to protect and serve. And they really genuinely care about other people. They didn't sign up to be traumatized and end up with PTSI. That wasn't part of the deal. But unfortunately, that's one of the results. And so we're here to be a safe place where they can be loved and seen and we can provide really great care. And we want to be able to reach more of our heroes because there's too many of them that are suffering in silence and they don't know that they're not going to get fired. They're not going to lose their job. All of our law enforcement have gone back to work. Usually there's not even a fit for duty. The medical records are not requested. So the department doesn't know anything about what happens here. They just want their officer, deputy, firefighter to get well and to come back to work. And so that's our job and our honor and joy to be able to love them, to care for them, to give them the tools and to help on their journey of restoration. And so we want to be able to reach more of them before it's too late because they don't need to suffer.
Your facility is a 6-bedroom, right? And you're getting the people that have really are going through it so deep. Is there anything in your future about maybe creating any programs where you can go into these fire departments or police stations before it gets to that point to have some type of training or medical interventions for just them learning as they're young, coming up and holding these careers?
There's a big push for that. So that's where like the wellness unit comes in, and there's a lot of amazing organizations that are more on the front end of things. I think it's first responder resiliency. So they actually they go into the different departments and they teach on mental health. They teach on the signs to look for of burnout or a decline in mental health. And they're providing tools and resources to first responders to keep them strong more on the emotional side and the mental health side of things before it's too late. There's also a lot of great retreats and weekend things and other agencies and nonprofits that are providing those services. And I highly recommend that as well, because prevention is really the best thing.
Well, I even know, just again, from the significant other side, I even did a class called SOS, Significant Other Survival, just to get into the head of our spouse, having them come off a 24-hour shift. We don't know what they experience. And here they come walking into the house and it's a normal day for us. And it's like, oh, go do this, go do this, go do this. And they're still trying to decompress, so really having empathy for them and giving them their time to get back into that position. And that class helped me as a wife. Yeah. And Andrew was just talking about that last night. He's like, I'm trying to get that going again because there are new spouses and it's a high divorce rate too. It does, I think, take a certain person, to be a spouse to a first responder. It's not easy, but I mean, I definitely think times are changing and they are looking, mental health is so big. I think as more of the old traditional first responders are retiring, things are changing.
We're seeing a huge shift. I mean, it used to be, especially with law enforcement, if you had a drinking problem, you were getting terminated automatically. And that culture still, or that fear kind of still exists, where so many officers are just deathly afraid of losing their job, losing their gun, losing their badge if they say that they have a problem. So what's actually, I think it's what's normal for us is the sergeants go over to their house and they kidnap them and they bring them to us. They're like, you need help and you're going to treatment. We can see it. Get your drunk ass over here. And I get officer in the intake office. I'm like, you're fine. Don't worry. We're going to take care of you. This is totally normal. Just blow right here, please, sir. It's like, I'm sober. I'm like, you just blew 0.31. You're not sober.
Yeah.
Like, really? Eat your cheeseburger. It's going to be fine.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Are there plans to, obviously, I'm sure you want to open more facilities, but I mean, is there something coming up? And maybe for women, because I know this is men only right now.
It is men only. I do want to open another treatment facility. I'm starting to see signs that the Lord is opening doors. And so we might get going on that here pretty soon, although that's another crazy risk, but God is in it. Yeah, I want to have 3 facilities in Palos Verdes, so that'd be 18 beds. The women's facility, there are not as many, obviously, female first responder veterans. I do really believe that females should go to a female-only treatment facility. Yeah. And so I know of one for veterans, female veterans, that's females only. And then there's a general population place in Orange County, New Directions for Women, that is female only, but it's general pop. I just don't think men and women should be living in the same house trying to get sober together. Like, it's not a good idea. We have a lot of jokes about that around here because it's a men's treatment facility. And then for me personally, opening a women's facility, I mean, I'm not closed off to the idea. I just think I need to grow in my personal journey and walk, because I grew up with my dad and my older brother and all his friends, and I played sports and I lifted weights and I went to engineering school and I wrestled Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then I went to work in construction, and now I run a men's treatment. Like, I'm just a really aggressive, domineering, controlling, like rah, 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 my way or the highway, like bossy, direct kind of person. And I mean, it's bad enough I make the men cry. I don't think the women would like coming here. Like, I need to work on me being softer and nicer before I think
I don't know. I feel like the men need more softness than the women sometimes. But you have the experience there, but I know
Like I don't like my tagline is I don't do women. I don't have a big women group. Like the Bible study that brought me to my knees, I was like, I don't do groups of women. And, but that's the one the Lord took me to. And that's my saving grace, but yeah, I can't do.
A lot of strong opinions, I guess. That makes it difficult.
Yeah. At least the men are like, they'll be mad at me and they'll like tell me to my face or whatever. And then they'll get over it and it's fine. It's just,
and women, it just builds.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, we're also like we're built to be a men's facility, and when we do have multiple facilities, like we have this one guy Dan, and he comes in and he's teaching on purpose and masculinity and identity, and so all of his teachings and curriculum is all around fatherhood and sonship and husband, being a husband and all of that, and so I wouldn't be able to use him like at a women's facility. I'd need to get a different person and train them and bring them on board. And I'm trying to have the same staff. Like I have this other guy, Manny, he's amazing. And so he's teaching on relationships and communication, and it could apply to women, but so much of what we're doing is really like, it's built for men. And so I want to replicate this. And at some point I might have a women's facility down the road, but there might be women that are way better qualified and God might call them, I hope.
He knows our weaknesses.
Or she will come into your life and you can collaborate. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Don't know. Have you seen, like, I know being first responders, there's definitely like an ego in that profession. When I'm not saying good or bad. It's just like you have to kind of have it for like what they go through. Do you see any softening or changes in them when they find a relationship with God? Like just kind of the way they maybe handle things or address things a little softer or confidently.
I mean, we see so many changes in them. Like all of that definitely happens.
Yeah.
I mean, what I normally see is when they come in, they're really guarded. They're like, I don't know who these people are. I hardly know who I am. My head's screwed on backwards right now. I don't know if I could trust them. Like, did they put something in my water? I mean, I put electrolytes in their water, and this one guy he thinks to this day that I like drugged him. I'm like, yeah, it was electrolytes, buddy. You just hadn't drank water in a long time. That's why you felt so good.
Trying to hydrate you.
So we see them start to trust us. And then as they get physically sober and emotionally sober, they start to open up, and then they start to help the newer guys, and they start to step into like the responsibility and owning their stuff and repairing their relationships and admitting where they were wrong. And I mean, every part of them just comes alive. And for the ones that do come to know the Lord, there is like more joy and life and gratitude. And they just come to terms with things. And the ones that come to know the Lord tend to stay sober. Whereas some of our other clients, they haven't. Unfortunately, they have relapsed, a couple of them. And so we see dramatic changes on all levels. One of my clients that came in, no church background, didn't know about God, did not grow up in church. He had flown out here from Texas, and he started to come to the Bible study, and we actually baptized him, which was so cool. And he's like, Shavonne, I didn't know that I was spiritually starving, and now my soul is getting fed. And like, he just celebrated 9 months sober, and he sends us like pictures and updates. He's climbing mountains and, surfing in Costa Rica, and like, it's so great to just see him like living an amazing life. So we see radical transformation in general for the clients that are willing to surrender, to open themselves up, to go through the program, to start to work the steps.
Well, so if we do have listeners that may be interested for themselves or a family members, what can they do to reach out?
They can call me. My cell phone number is our admissions line. So 805-701-1309. They can look us up on the internet, throttleandthrive.com. And I have lots of different content and things, and our phone number. They can email me, info@throttleandthrive.com. We have a Google page so they can read other reviews, or even our website. We've got testimonials, but basically it's reach out. Call me, email me, text me, whatever. Contact me somehow and let me know how I can help. And, maybe our facility is the right place, and maybe it's not. There's a lot of amazing people doing a lot of work. For example, sometimes people really just need mental health care, and they need to go to a mental health primary facility. There's a really great one up in Utah called Deer Hollow that's highly recommended for first responders. So, sometimes other programs, or like for women, other programs might be a better fit, but for the clients where we think the right fit is here and, us having a bed available, we would love to be of service. And so we can get someone in usually same day within like an hour or less or whatever, how long it takes them to get here. But we're here to help and point people in the right direction as needed.
One other question. Do you have an anchor verse for yourself?
Romans 8, I believe it's 28. For I am convinced that nothing can separate us from the love of God, neither height nor depths or, I don't have it fully memorized, but it's basically Paul saying like nothing can separate us from God. And so that's one of them. I don't have a ton of like, yes, this and this, and I don't have any tattoos, but
And what is your definition of God? Do you have one?
Do I have a concise one? No. I mean, essentially like God is the creator and he's the source of love and he created us to have relationship with him, and he's good and he's faithful. And he is what keeps everything together. Like he is the life force in everything. And he's the reason that we're here. And I think our purpose is to know him.
Love it.
I love it.
And to keep our theme, we're the lost sheep found, and they call you the sheepdog. How did that come about?
I've been going to different gang conferences with the various police departments. That's what I do now. And so a sheepdog is the dog that protects the sheep from the wolves. So the sheep are the people, or let's say like just average civilians. And then the wolves are the bad guys, the criminals, gangs, etc. And so the sheepdog it's law enforcement typically. And I would throw, firefighters in there as well. And they're the ones that risk their lives and are on the front lines to protect the sheep or the general public from the bad guys. And so I consider myself a sheepdog.
Yeah, I love it.
I love that. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Shavonne. It was really nice to get to know you. And
I know once Andrew went to that meeting, he came home, he's like, I have somebody for you.
I'm glad you can see that.
He's like, there's more to her story. He's like, I know there's more to her story. And I'm like, okay, well, give me her name and number. He's like, well, here's her website. You
do it, honey.
Yeah, you figure it out.
Great. Well, I would love to be of service to him and his department. And if they have anybody, definitely. Or if I can get in touch with the peer support or wellness unit, I'd love for those firefighters to know. And even if, I'm sure they work with police and the sheriffs to know like, hey, we exist and we can help you guys.
Well, and Andrew, a few of the guys, they're starting a Bible study in the department. So he's really stoked on that. He's like been working with one of the pastors at our church, like, okay, give me a good book to, like getting tips and stuff to be the moderator and facilitator of it. So it's pretty neat to see that working in their department.
It's huge. It's so needed. It's amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. This was so fun. It was wonderful to meet you both. Thank you.
Yeah,
nice to meet you.
Okay, bye, Shavonne.
Bye. Thank you.
You can find the Lost Sheep Found podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Please take a moment to follow us on Instagram at Lost Sheep Found Podcast and subscribe on our website, lostsheepfoundpodcast.com. Do you have a story that may help someone in their journey? Submit it on our website or send an email to lostsheepfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Until then, take care and stay found.
When the heat wave starts to break and the ice and snow melts away, when the tears we've cried have all run dry, we find the rainbows in. We'll be walking in the sunshine with him.